When Volkswagen decided to drop in a more powerful turbocharged four-cylinder engine into their Tiguan, I got very, very excited because early announcements were that it was going to come under $50,000, it was going to be a top trim for the 2026 model year, and on paper, it looked like a better deal than an Audi Q5. Well, the day has finally arrived where the R-Line Turbo is starting to hit showrooms across the country. And luckily enough, I was able to find one here at Gervais Volkswagen. Now, we're going to speed run through this because I was not expecting to do a video today. It was my off day. But the Tiguan R-Line Turbo is on my short list of vehicles I'm looking at buying. And in today's video, we're going to go over what this model is offering us today under $50,000. I'm going to be brutally honest here for this video because I have high hopes, high expectations. And is this crossover going to let me down? Well, in today's video, we're going to find out. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Gervais Volkswagen here in Lowell, Massachusetts for letting me come down here to check out the Tiguan R-Line Turbo. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Volkswagen inventory. So as always, and you know what time it is, let's begin with that pricing. For the 2026 Volkswagen Tiguan SEL R-Line Turbo, you're looking at a starting cost of around $45,000. Our model comes in just below 46 grand. And one thing I want to point out here is that even with taxes and fees included, you're spending less than $50,000. It has hit that goal. To come in under $50,000, this is huge. Now, when you're looking at 46 grand though, this is more expensive than a Honda CR-V, Toyota RAV4, Hyundai Tucson. So you better get a vehicle that feels a bit more unique and exclusive. And at least design-wise, I think Volkswagen has done that, but let's analyze these new looks for the 2026 model year. So starting up front, a lot of accents do carry over from the SE R-Line, which is a nice middle trim in the lineup if you don't want to spend over $40,000. With the SEL R-Line Turbo, everything gets a bit more enhanced, where you are going to have a crossover that looks very upscale and sporty. So starting off with the lights, full LED headlights here and LED daytime running lights, and that carries through the front fascia into your emblem, which is also illuminated. Very classy. But it gets even better for the lower portion of the front bumper. Look at these air intakes, they're massive, and that sucks in that air, makes it more aerodynamic. I also love the mesh grille design too. Now, I will say, you gotta go with sandstone gray, Monterey blue, or avocado green. To have the gloss black trim contrast with those three colors is most certainly the way to go. What I also like too is you have a rounder front fascia, so you can tell some things do carry over from the ID4, and to provide this for a gas-powered model, I think looks pretty sleek and cutting edge. Now, as you make your way over to the side profile, you're going to notice the 20-inch alloy wheels. Now, some of you might be very concerned about that because larger tires creates a bit more road noise and harshness to the ride quality, but it seems as though that Volkswagen has retuned the suspension to make it feel a bit more agile and athletic, and possibly helping out with that refinement. Now, from factory, they are wrapped in Pirellis, which I have my own personal thoughts on. We'll talk about that during the test drive. Now, unfortunately, this won't show on our model. We also have gloss black wheel arches, which look really nice on this vehicle. It gives you a two-tone look throughout and lets you know it's going to be a luxury crossover rather than being off-road worthy, although you do have a ground clearance of 7.5 inches. Now, interestingly enough here, with this being an R-Line, gloss black side mirror caps are not standard on all colors. So if you go with avocado green, you'll get that, but not with sandstone gray or Monterey blue. I'm very surprised by that, although you will have your LED turn signal indicators, and obviously you have blind spot detection for added safety. And then to round out the side profile, you will have your roof rails here, and that will match the chrome strip that you're going to find running the length of the side profile. And then as you make your way around to the back here, you're going to notice the LED taillights, which is very prominent on this model. In fact, the lighting systems that Volkswagen has for this generation, I think is very impressive here. So you have the light bar that runs the length of the rear fascia, matching what you have up front, and also the illuminated emblem as well. Very classy, very upscale, typically not found in this particular class. Now, there is some symmetry to the rear fascia that you have up front, and you're going to notice the mesh grille design for the lower portion of that rear bumper, which obviously isn't going to be functional. Interestingly enough though, no visible exhaust outlets. So this is not going in the Volkswagen GTI direction when it comes to its overall design. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. I think this is one good-looking crossover, and looks is half the battle. As we briefly hop inside this Tiguan, the first thing you're going to notice is, one, the leather trim seats. But it does get even deeper than that, because they're heated, ventilated, and massaging. That is right, massaging out of the Tiguan R-Line Turbo. Now that's a feature you're not going to find out of the Audi Q5, just for reference. So when you look at it from that perspective, Volkswagen is most certainly moving in a new direction here out of this vehicle. They have no regard for Audi, maybe even Porsche as well. So this is actually a huge step for Volkswagen. With these leather trim seats, they do feel plush, they do feel comfortable, they are supportive. But we got to get to the technology though. We got to get to the things that is going to draw your attention the most. And for the R-Line Turbo for 2026, you're going to have this massive, absolutely massive 15-inch touchscreen with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility. It is paired with the Harman Kardon audio system. Very nice. Now, we have gone over this infotainment system before. It was a smaller screen the last time we checked out the Tiguan. But this 15-inch screen almost is unnecessary, because it does get in the way when you are driving around. It's in your line of sight right there. Now, it is within arm's reach. We at least have that, but no physical buttons or dials for the dual zone climate control up front, AC, front and rear defrosters, fan speed or fan direction. That is still at the bottom of this screen. So not necessarily user-friendly. But thankfully, though, this infotainment system is laid out the exact same way as the other trims, which we have dove into a few times. So I'm not going to go through all this again for this video. Now let's build up to the good stuff here, because you will have a full digital gauge cluster, which is molded into the dashboard almost seamlessly. And some manufacturers get this right, others don't. What I do like is that you don't feel as though you're looking at a cheap screen. I personally think, though, the way it's laid out, the way it's designed, this is better than the Audi Q5 for the B10 generation. The resolution is better, in my opinion. Just the way it pops out at you, you can customize it. It's a bit more intuitive. And that is one thing that is lacking out of Audi. So this is kind of where I see Volkswagen almost having no regard for their more expensive siblings in the family. Also, you will have physical buttons on the steering wheel. That is right. That will help you control that digital gauge cluster in front of you. And better yet, with the R-Line Turbo, you do have a head-up display as well. So you can keep your eyes on the road ahead of you rather than looking down at screens. Very nice. Now, as you take a look at the rest of the interior, it's a bit more minimalist in design. On the left side on the dashboard, next to your left leg is going to be your exterior lighting buttons. At least you have physical buttons there. Some manufacturers don't do that. You're going to have your gear selector on the steering wheel stock. Unfortunately, once again, I have no idea why Volkswagen does that. Then taking a look at the center console, you will have your two cup holders here and a small cubby for some loose change. You're going to have your start-stop button and then a dial here. Now, this dial does control your volume, but when you press down on it, now it controls your drive mode selector. So with the R-Line Turbo, you have Eco, Comfort, Sport, Custom, Off-Road, and Snow. Like I said before, I don't think you'll be going off-road with this model, but it's at least there. And you will have your electronic parking brake. Next to that will be a nice storage compartment for some smaller items, maybe a couple smartphones, wallets, or other tech gadgets, and there will be two more USB-C inputs. And then lastly, there's going to be another area for a smartphone with that center armrest. So really nice here. It's a more trimmed down interior compared to some luxury vehicles out there. But I think at least luxury wise, I think what they're doing here is really nice. And this steering wheel, huge upgrade over the other trims as well. And then to round out the front seating area, above will be a panoramic moonroof, which brings in a lot of natural light to the interior. Then quickly taking a look at the second row, all the interior dimensions carry over, such as legroom, headroom, shoulder room. I think you can squeeze in a third person in the center with this vehicle because it is decently sized. Now you're looking at close to 40 inches of legroom, which is close to a Toyota RAV4, a little bit shorter than a Honda CR-V and other vehicles in this class, but it's enough where everyone should be comfortable, whether they're average-sized adults or smaller kids. Also, with that panoramic moonroof, it doesn't take away too much of that headroom, so taller passengers will not be hitting their head on the headliner. When it comes to the seat material, though, the leather seats, one thing I didn't bring up here, we had the Gregorio gray with black leather, but you can go with amber if you so desire. Amber would be a bit adventurous here for this vehicle. Now, when it comes to the amenities, though, this is where the R-Line Turbo definitely takes a turn for the better, where you are going to have 2 center-mounted air vents, but you will have climate control for the second row, so 3-zone climate control overall in this vehicle, and heated outboard seats. So passengers back here will be nice and warm during those winter months, and you will have 2 USB-C inputs. Then to round out the second row seating area, you will receive a center armrest with 2 cup holders. And then returning to the rear fascia to take a look at the cargo area for the 2026 Volkswagen Tiguan R-Line Turbo. As expected, you are going to have a power liftgate. And inside, behind the second row seats, you're looking at right around 26.5 cubic feet of room, which admittedly is not the best in this class. This would be similar to a Mazda CX-5. This will fall behind the Honda CR-V, Toyota RAV4, Hyundai Tucson, Kia Sportage. And then if you're comparing this to a Volkswagen GTI or Golf R because you're looking for a larger vehicle for you and your family, it is going to be about 8 to 9 cubic feet more. So a bit more practicality, a bit more versatility here. So if you're looking to upsize, you're looking to grow up a bit, this would be the way to go. Now, you're also going to have deep side pockets on both sides of the cargo area for some smaller items. Maybe a couple of water bottles, car detail equipment, or maybe even a first aid kit. Also, there's another storage compartment on the left side that's a bit more deeper into that cargo area. Also found on both sides of the cargo area will be quick release latches to conveniently lower the second row seats. And when they are lowered, you're looking at under 70 cubic feet of room. So, not the best in this class, but it's not the worst in this market. And also, better yet, it's going to be a bit more practical than that Volkswagen Taos. Now, one thing I will say, though, is that if you are going on those longer road trips, you might want to remove that rear cargo cover. That way you can store more items back here. But better yet, and this is huge for a lot of you, because I know that some manufacturers don't offer this feature, especially for hybrids, you will have a spare tire beneath the floor mat, so that way if you do encounter a flat on those road trips or travels, you can fix that and be back on the road. With this not being my first time driving the R-Line Turbo, I've had some time to formulate my thoughts and opinions for this crossover, and there's a lot to like. A 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine producing 268 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. It's paired with an 8-speed automatic transmission. All-wheel drive does come standard, and when you take a look at the fuel economy statistics, it's not far off the other trims that have a Turbo 4 but not this power. 22 miles per gallon in the city and 29 miles per gallon on the highway. Not too bad. I mean, it's not the best in this class. There are hybrids from Honda and Toyota, but if you're looking for a fun daily driver, this might be the pick. But there is one thing that is scaring me off here out of the R-Line Turbo, at least for the first production run, and that's the fact we don't have paddle shifters. You would think that for a crossover that's basically a lifted Volkswagen GTI, we would have that. We'd be able to rotate the gears ourselves. And that isn't the case here. Now, I don't know if that's just an early production thing or if Volkswagen's going to hold out on that feature. I hope they don't, because I have seen reviews where there is the paddles. So speaking as a consumer here, that is one thing that concerns me. However, what doesn't concern me is that this basically feels like an Audi Q5. Maybe closer to a B9.5. Then a B10. The B10 utilizes the PPC platform, 7-speed dual clutch. And even though we don't have the dual clutch here for this model, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to complain about that. I wish we had the dual clutch because I think that this would feel far more sporty, aggressive, and GTI-like. But this 8-speed is willing to please. Best of all, it feels light on its feet. And with the handling and the steering input, there is some weight here. And it's also helped out with this steering wheel, because the other trims don't get this GTI-like steering wheel, and this provides so much more confidence. Aggressive 10-2, firm 9-3 grips, the way I like driving. Now, I can definitely tell immediately that Volkswagen retuned the suspension for this trim, because there's a bit more rigidity, there's a bit more stiffness to the way in which it handles and performs. And this is all a good thing, because you're not going to notice that when you're going over the bumps and imperfections. But when you're on a winding back road, when you're in the corners, when you're getting on the highway, you can have some fun here with this vehicle. And that's a key difference compared to a lot of rivals in this market. Now, I'd have to wait a couple of weeks, possibly a couple of months, to compare this to a Toyota RAV4 for 2026 and the new Mazda CX-5. But when you're comparing this to what's out there right now, this might be one of the more fun crossovers out there. Now, when you're taking a look at the luxury aspects for the on-road driving experience, these leather seats do feel pretty nice. They're not aggressively bolstered, so not out of the GTI, but I think enough to give you some confidence when you are on those back roads. You don't be swaying around too much here. Best of all, though, compared to an Audi Q5 for the B10 generation, we have massaging front seats. Now, you don't get the massaging seat functionality out of the Q5, so that's pretty interesting here for a vehicle coming in under $50,000. Also, with interior insulation, this engine doesn't growl that much. It is quiet, and there is a sense of compliance here. Now, I am in sport mode, which is pretty much the mode I would stay in. And what I do like is that it doesn't feel tacky or cheap, that it's not a fake experience when you pop it into sport mode, that yes, the throttle response does get a bit more aggressive, and you notice with this 8-speed automatic that the gear shifts are just a bit more crisper and quicker to respond, but it doesn't feel fake here like a lot of manufacturers, especially for manufacturers that are not going to sports tune their crossovers. This feels pretty nice here. What I also kind of glossed over for the interior portion of this video is that Volkswagen did do a pretty good job with the interior materials on the dashboard, on the door panels, and center console. So it does feel somewhat luxury-like, although the gap is still big between this and a B10. But as you can tell there, it has a nice get up and go. And sure, on paper, it doesn't seem like a GTI at all. You're not looking at 0 to 60 times at around 5.7 to 6 seconds. But in this market, it does feel pretty spry. On the brakes, not too bad. There was some travel on that brake pedal, though. But I love the turn-in. Some body roll there. But pretty compliant. And you're already at highway speeds. Impressive. Very impressive. At highway speeds, road noise actually isn't that bad. It's similar to a luxury crossover. And honestly, I think I'm hearing more road noise from the tires than anything else, and that can be fixed if you throw on some Michelins. Not sponsored, by the way, but that's what I would do here with this vehicle. The refinement here is what really stands out of this vehicle, because there's a clear distinction between last generation and this one. And this was the missing piece of the puzzle. That if you were someone that liked the Tiguan but wanted more power, you couldn't get it in the US. In Europe, you had the Tiguan R, and that would give you like 300 horsepower. Unfortunately, we're not going to get that here in the US. But for 2026, with this 2-liter turbo, we're getting, I think, much more than we bargained for, and I think we're getting a lot to work with for its price point. And the last thing I want to point out here, before we wrap up this test drive, is the seat positioning. You sit very high up in this model. A nice commanding feel and presence over the roadways. Nice panoramic view. A-pillars really aren't that aggressive. So I don't think I have any blind spots when you are approaching intersections or red lights. Taking a look at your side mirrors, they are decently sized so I can see what's in my blind spots and in the lane next to me. And then looking out back, nice clear view there. So a lot of visibility. And really, I mean, again, for a vehicle from a mainstream manufacturer coming in under $50,000, this is an eye-opener. This is most certainly an eye-opener from Volkswagen. Now, the only question remaining is, do they need to drop in a hybrid at some point? Probably, especially looking at where buyers are right now in the US. They do want hybrid technology. They want that better fuel economy. But this is also in some way, if we have the paddle shifters, this is in some way a grown-up's version of a GTI. And I can live with that. I can live with the body roll. I can live with the lack of a sports tune suspension if I'm getting a crossover that feels this playful, this agile, and this fun. And to me, as I wrap up this test drive, a lot to be excited about. A lot to be excited about for sure. It's just that I have questions from Volkswagen. Why don't we have those paddle shifters for this first model run? That is one thing I'm very confused by. and slightly concerned with, because I want those paddle shifters. I've seen videos with them, and for me, that would be a make or break deal. And then lastly, to wrap up this video, we gotta go over the pros and cons here before we sign off, because this is on my short list for Car of the Year, and it's also on my short list for vehicles I want to buy. I'm very intrigued with what the Tiguan has to offer for 2026. So let's begin with those pros. The first one is going to be the performance. 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, 268 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque. Sure, we don't have a 7-speed dual clutch, but the 8-speed does shift very smoothly here. Next is going to be the design. The exterior looks classy, upscale, also aggressive with the R-Line design. I love the front lighting system, also the illuminated badges for the front and rear fascias. They really nailed it with the design for this vehicle. Then for the interior, very luxury-like, almost Audi Q5-like. The leather-wrapped steering wheel, which is a nice upgrade over the other trims. These leather trim seats that are heated, ventilated, and massaging. The massaging seat functionality alone puts this in a category, I think, a little higher up on the totem pole than a lot of its rivals. Also, the way this vehicle feels, I think Volkswagen is most certainly targeting a luxury demographic, a more premium buyer for sure with the R-Line Turbo. Then we got to get to the cons. The first one is going to be no paddle shifters. Now, I did contact Volkswagen today. I contacted them a couple of minutes ago. Hopefully they get back to me, because I am going to follow up on that question, because I was noticing in other videos that we had paddle shifters, and not one R-Line Turbo I've come across in Massachusetts yet that have arrived at dealers has that. So that's one thing to keep in mind here. It needs to have paddle shifters. Next is going to be the technology. This massive 15-inch touchscreen is so unnecessary, and it takes away from the overall experience being behind the wheel. A smaller screen would be nicer, also more physical buttons and dials for sure. Then lastly is going to be the practicality and the fuel economy. We got to be fair here. The practicality falls behind the RAV4, CR-V, Hyundai Tucson, Kia Sportage, so it's not even in the top of its class or even near that at around $45,000. And then the fuel economy, you're looking at right around 22 to 29 city and highway. So that again is going to fall a bit behind the hybrids in this class. But the last question is going to be, are the cons enough to scare you away from the Tiguan R-Line Turbo? Well, it's most certainly cooled off my excitement in a way, especially with the lack of paddle shifters. But I can live with the smaller dimensions, I can live with the smaller practicality, and then the fuel efficiency, because this is similar to a Volkswagen GTI. And then really though, for the second row, the amount of interior space, that makes up for it. It's family friendly. But for me, it's going to be those paddle shifters. That is the one takeaway here that I can't necessarily live without if this is going to be a GTI-like Tiguan on the market under $50,000. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys next time.